Hello students! In the previous two units, 10.1 and 10.2, we discussed the fundamental concepts of thinking, forming judgments, and decision making. In this unit, 10.3, we're going to be focusing on language before we start applying thinking and language together. So let's start focusing on the fundamental concepts of language. Language is a defining and adaptive milestone in human evolution. Linguist Noam Chomsky argued that the human brain is biologically hardwired for the acquisition of language. Thus, all cultures have language. All languages have certain structural properties in common, and children all over the world learn to fluently speak the language they hear at about the same age, and without much effort or instruction. When it comes to language, it's clear that human form for learning occurs, but it's also clear that humans are born with a unique sensitivity to the sounds and structures of speech. Language is a form of communication consisting of a system of sounds, words, meanings, and rules for their combination. We'll consider various forms of communication in the animal world, the unique properties of language, the question of whether language can be learned by non-human animals, and finally, the relationship between thought and language. According to the World Almanac Book and Facts, there are between 5,000 to 6,000 languages worldwide, and that doesn't even take into consideration the different dialects within each language. With the dialects taken into consideration, there are tens of thousands of variations amongst these languages. It's amazing how many different languages seem to surface when we take that into consideration. To appreciate this point, consider the principal languages, ranked in order of usage in the world's population. Mandarin Chinese is number 1, English number 2, Hindi 3, Spanish, Russian, Arabic, Mali, Bengali, Portuguese, French, German, Japanese, Urdu, and others. Despite the differences, however, linguists are quick to note that from a Martian's perspective, all humans speak with a single tongue. The reason is that all languages share certain universal properties, semantically, generativity, and displacement. Now let's start talking about those. There are several units of language, ranging from the phoneme, which is the most basic unit of sound. It's the building block of the spoken language, like b, a, t. It's the most basic unit of sound, single tone. And these single phonemes are combined to form morphemes. Morphemes are the smallest unit of tone that actually carry meaning. A string of randomly connected phonemes does not convey sound that is meaningful. So morphemes, on the other hand, have meaning and can range from prefixes to suffixes and very small words like ing and ed. If you see a suffix ed at the end of a word, what does that typically mean? It typically means it's past tense. I walked, I talked to him yesterday. Okay, so if you add and de, which are two distinct phonemes, you combine them together to make the suffix ed, which has past tense meaning, which is a morpheme. Okay? Well, next, combinations of morphemes become the building blocks for phrases, groups of words that act as a unit to convey meaning. Grammar, whether we choose to follow it or not, set up the rules for language. If language is so generative that we can produce limitless numbers of novel sentences, how are we able to comprehend each other as competently as we do? The key to managing generativity is syntax, rules of grammar that govern how words can be arranged in a sentence. Expressions are not random strings of unrelated sounds, but rather words that are combined in familiar and orderly ways. Every language has its own unique syntax. For example, adjectives usually come before the noun in the English language. For example, white wine. But nouns or adjectives usually come after the noun in the Spanish language. So it would be vino blanco, for example. Semantics have meaning, is understood as and communicated. Again, semantics play a role in determining how meaning is understood and communicated, which play a role in the rules of grammar and become adopted. This brings us to another point about the generativity of language. Any one thought can be expressed in different ways, regardless of whether I say the home team won the championship, or the championship was won by the home team, or what the home team won was that championship, baby. You grasp the meaning no matter how I say it. Any underlying thought can be represented in more than one way. Syntax provides us with a set of transformational grammatical rules for how to put meaning into words when we speak and derive meaning from words when we are spoken to. Paralleling the changes that take place in the way children think is their development of language. Between the ages of 1 and 6, children acquire a vocabulary that consists of an estimated 14,000 words. Imagine learning 14,000 words from birth to the age of 6. That's incredible. Again, highlighting how significant the critical period is. All right? They learn on average about 9 words a day. That's pretty amazing. They also learn to combine words in ways that fit grammatical rules, too complex for most of us to explain. What's amazing about these achievements is that the boys and girls of all cultures absorb the words and grammar of language without formal education. It just happens. As in cognitive development, some children learn to speak earlier than others, but the sequence of achievements is the same for all. Newborns communicate their needs by crying. In their second month, they also use the tongue to make more articulate cooing sounds, such as ooh and ah. At about 4 months, babies begin playful babbling. And this is vocalizing for the first time in ways that sound like human speech. Like ah, boo boo da da gee ga ga ga, ga ga ga, like something like that. I'll play you a video of my son and you'll understand. But as with crying and cooing, babbling is inborn. Regardless of whether the native language is English, French, Spanish, or German, babies all over the world initially make the same sounds, including some they never hear at home. Even babies who are born deaf and cannot hear speech babble right on schedule. Sometime near the first birthday, give or take a few months, babies utter the first real words. The sounds are brief and not clearly pronounced, but they communicate meaning in the native tongue. For example, my nephew used ba for bottle. For the next few months, babies speak one-word utterances, and the number of words in their vocabulary increases sharply. From 4 or 5 words at 12 months of age to 30 words at 18 months of age to 250 words at about 2 years of age. These utterances aren't random. Babies tend to name objects and actions that they desire, which explains why my nephew's first word was ball. He really wanted to play with the ball, so he finally said it. He had that motivation. At about 2 years, At about 2 years of age, there's a vocabulary explosion as children accumulate hundreds of new words a year. At this point, children will pick up a new word they encounter in conversation, even when they hear it only once or twice. Another important development in language occurs when children begin to form 2 or 3 word phrases. These early word combinations illustrate what is called telegraphic speech, because, as in telegrams, kept short for cost reasons, they include only nouns, verbs, and some essential modifiers, yet make sense to the listener, like more juice, or I want more juice, or no sit chair, I don't want to sit in the chair. It's interesting that these primitive sentences forms contain the seeds of grammar. It's also interesting that the statements are often overextensions. For example, until different animals can be distinguished, the 2-year-old who uses the word doggy to call the family pet will use the same word about a cat, horse, or an elephant for that matter. And again, that's an example of overextension. And that also concludes Unit 10.3, Language. Our next unit, 10.4, will be our final subunit, and we will discuss thinking and language and how they impact each other. See you guys next time.